Default is the fate of Pakistan. What is truly terrifying is the total lack of ideas on how to get Pakistan out of the kind of economic problem in which it is right now. Their lack of vision and lack of ideas is reflected in the budget itself, which is an extremely expansionary budget at a time when the economy has no money. The economy is literally in a meltdown stage. It's run out of money. It's completely bankrupt. Pakistanis have really no money. They have no idea on how to get the money, because what Ishaq Dar has done in this budget has planted more minefields than he has cleaned up. We promised you last week that we'll try and analyze the budget which was presented on the 9th of June by Pakistan's Finance Minister Ishaq Dar. Now, frankly, I think a lot of what we predicted last week has turned out to be true, and that's not because we are some kind of soothsayers or clairvoyants, but it's simply because that is the way Pakistan's economy functions. In rest of the world, it's the economy stupid, but in Pakistan, I think stupidity has been taken to a point where the economy is completely ignored. And that shows in the kind of numbers there are. So there is nothing really unpredictable in the budget that Ishaq Dar presented. In fact, all along pretty expected lines. But I think what is extremely terrifying are not the terrible numbers that have been presented in the budget and before that the economic survey. What is truly terrifying is the total lack of ideas on how to get Pakistan out of the kind of economic problem in which it is right now, which is almost an existential problem. The economy is, literally in a meltdown stage. It's run out of money. It's completely bankrupt. And you really have no body who has a clear idea on how to bring the economy out of this crisis. The governing party, that is the Muslim League Nawaz, which always fancied itself on its economic policies, I think their lack of vision and lack of ideas is reflected in the budget itself, which is an extremely expansionary budget at a time when the economy has no money. You have the opposition party, which is Imran Khan and his Tehreek-e-Insaf, which in some ways has been responsible for actually deepening the mess in Pakistan before they were booted out of office last year. Their lack of economic vision came out a couple of days back when Imran Khan held a meeting with some of his quote-unquote economic wizards, many of whom are responsible for the mess that is Pakistan's economy today. And again, the ideas that were thrown up were the same old ideas with which Imran Khan had come into office. These included that we will get so much money from overseas Pakistanis who will invest money, and then suddenly Pakistan will become a land of milk and honey. But not only that, Imran Khan's idea of improving the economy is to create more bureaucracy. Now, he had this great idea of setting up a separate ministry for earning foreign exchange. I've not heard of a crazier idea, but then, you haven't seen Pakistan making economic policy. So, if you do, then you will come across many more such crazy ideas. But I think the numbers are really, really bad. Number one, I think if I was to look at the big picture and give you the big picture, I think it's very clear that Pakistan is now well and truly in a debt trap situation. Pakistan is bankrupt. Now, bankruptcy, very often people think that the amount of money you owe people is a sign of bankruptcy. No, it isn't. Bankruptcy is when you can't service your debts. And Pakistan clearly is not in a position to service its debts. notwithstanding all the tall talk of Ishaq Dar and his trying to talk up the economy, trying to infuse confidence with utterly disingenuous kind of statements which he makes, his flying into temper because the IMF has dug in its heels and is not ready to give in to his dissemble. So clearly, the big problem is that the Pakistanis have really no money. They really don't have any idea on how to start even cutting down their costs. Now, what has happened in this particular budget? One, it's a massively expansionary budget. The size of the budget is 50%, more than 50% of what the budget for the financial year ending 23 was, FY23, is more than 50% of that. It's almost about 14.5 trillion rupees. But the problem is that the revenue which the government of Pakistan, the federal government, will earn is just about 6.9 trillion rupees. This is tax revenues plus non-tax revenue. But what they'll be spending is something like 14.5 trillion. Now, clearly, the size of the deficit financing which they require is more than the revenue which they are earning. Unsustainable situation, but it becomes even more unsustainable when you break down these numbers. The gap between the revenue of the federal government and just debt servicing. Debt servicing is about 500 billion rupees, 500 billion rupees more than the revenue of the federal government. This is not even a classic debt trap situation. This is even worse than that. This is a complete bankruptcy situation. So you have a situation where you have to borrow money to even service your debt. And if that is not all, what it also means is that you have to borrow money for defense. Again, there's been no cut in defense spending. You have to borrow money for paying pensions. The pension bill has ballooned. And why this is important is, we've heard a lot of carping sounds in India on the Agniveer scheme. And one of the reasons, among others, one of the reasons was this ballooning pension payments. Not just in the army, but I think we have made some pension reforms even in the civilian side. And although I think under political pressure, we are likely to shoot ourselves in the head if you look at how various parties are now promising to bring back the old pension scheme, which will be a complete disaster in my view. And we should look at the kind of disaster which Pakistan is undergoing today, because they did not bring out any pension reform. But the Pakistani pension bill has been galloping. It was roughly around 500 billion rupees last year. Bulk of it was defense pensions. That bill of just the federal government has gone up beyond 700 billion rupees. And when you add the pension bill of provincial governments, the total pension bill of Pakistan is about 1.4 trillion rupees. Clearly unaffordable. And this is now increasing at a pace which the economy cannot sustain. The fiscal side of the economy simply cannot sustain. This year, they've actually increased the pensions by almost about 17.5%. So one is the defense spending. The second is the pension bill. The third is the subsidy bill, which again has gone up. At least the budget documents put it less than the revised estimates of last year's budget. But even then, I think the subsidy bill is huge at over 1.1 trillion rupees. And it's likely to go up because a bulk of these subsidies are on electricity and power tariffs, which clearly is again a completely broken sector. And they have no idea how to fix it, because in the power sector, the debt, the circular debt is again galloping. It's almost, it has crossed the 2.5 trillion mark. and there are huge commitments which the Pakistani government is simply not able to meet with the kind of resources it has. But to reduce the electricity subsidy, it means raising power tariffs, but their power tariffs are already unaffordable, so the government cannot raise it, and even less so in an election year. That is assuming elections will happen this year, which is extremely doubtful given the very precarious economic situation. And in fact, just a couple of days back, there was an article in which this journalist had broken down the kind of debt obligations which Pakistan has to meet over the next few months. And according to this particular article, it predicted that chances are that by September or October, the foreign exchange reserves would have run out. There would be a run on the foreign exchange reserves. There could also be a run on the banks. And that is when apocalypse will hit the Pakistan economy. So quite clearly, that is the direction in which things are headed going forward. Now, it is under this circumstance, if you were to raise your electricity tariffs, if you were to cut subsidies, it would have a massive impact on the economic situation of the people. And like I said, it's in an election year. How do you go to people after having imposed so much of economic distress on them? Which is why, like I said, elections are supposed to be held sometime in October. But if the economic meltdown happens at that point of time, chances are that whatever government there is by September, likely to be a caretaker government, that will get an elongated period in office. And it means that basically democracy is dead. It's a kind of a government of technocrats, which is underwritten by the Pakistan army. And that means, the end of democracy for the foreseeable future in Pakistan. But I think democracy is not such an important criteria for the Pakistanis at this point in time, given the kind of parlous situation they are in economically. The other problem is that they have also increased the salaries of government servants at a time when people in rest of the economy are losing their jobs, businesses are shutting down. The government has thought it fit to raise salaries of government servants who enjoy some degree of permanence in their job, some degree of stability. Their salaries have been increased by 30 to 35%. Now, clearly, again, at a time when the government is simply not earning enough, to increase their salaries by this amount doesn't make any sense. What is even worse is that even the pretense of reform has not been made in this budget. It is almost as though, it was just a normal kind of a downturn in the economy, nothing to worry about, not the kind of existential crisis which Pakistan faces, but simply a business cycle or an economic cycle downturn, and that, you could simply tinker around at the edges and present the budget and move things forward. That is the impression which somebody sitting outside Pakistan or even somebody sitting in Pakistan gets after reading this particular budget. So clearly not even a pretense at reform. On the contrary, what they've done is what you might call de-reform. For example, they have now made money laundering a kosher thing in Pakistan. Apparently now, under the budget provisions, if you get $100,000 from abroad, no questions asked. I don't know how this will fit in with the FATF parameters for stopping money laundering and terror finance, but this particular provision of the law in Pakistan makes money laundering a simple thing to be done, and clearly the IMF has already indicated that this is not acceptable. So this is one. The other is some of the estimates that have been presented in the budget. I think the 3.5% growth projection is completely over the top. It's extremely unlikely that Pakistan will even cross 2% of growth, if at all. Chances are it could be a similar kind of a growth rate which they've shown this year. Perhaps it could even go into the negative. Incidentally, this year or in the financial year 23, the Pakistani showed a 0.3% growth, while independent economists now have said or have estimated that actually the Pakistan economy was negative 3% last year, in the last fiscal. So going forward in the financial year 24, chances of growth being positive are very, very slim. But the revenue figures which they have shown, and this is, I'm taking the revenue figures which the government of Pakistan has shown, clearly do not measure up. For example, they have said that revenue will increase by almost 2 trillion rupees. They just barely managed to collect about 7.2 trillion this time. They are projecting a revenue of 9.2 trillion next year. But if you do not get the kind of economic growth you are looking at, then clearly this money is not coming. And even if you get the economic growth, I don't think this money is coming. Ishaq Dar has strangely, from where all he'll meet the financing gap which is there in the budget, he has given a figure of $2.4 billion, which is what is left in the outstanding IMF program. The IMF in 2019, the program which the IMF had signed with Pakistan, it was later amended last year. But the program which the IMF had signed with Pakistan was about $6.5 billion. Now, out of that, 3.9 have already been paid and about 2.5, 2.6 is left. Those are supposed to be the last two tranches which are to come. Now, the IMF program ends on the 30th of June, and as of now, there is absolutely no indication that the IMF is going to give those two tranches which are left, which is roughly about $2.4, $2.6 billion. But Ishaq Dar has added that $2.4, $2.6 billion in the estimates of the monies which they will receive from the IMF in next year's budget. Now, on what basis he has done that? Only Ishaq Dar, the consummate bookkeeper or cooker of books, fudger of figures can explain. Because if this IMF program is going to end on the 30th of June, how are you putting the monies which were supposed to come by then in next fiscal year? One. Number two, if you are saying that you will be entering into a new IMF program by next year, then is the new IMF program just about $2.4 or $2.6 billion? What are going to be the parameters of that particular IMF program? So clearly, figure fudging. A lot of figures have been projected on what Pakistan hopes to receive from its friends, the Saudis and the Chinese and the others. But frankly, until now, none of them have given any money. So clearly, this budget is a work of fiction. It's a budget which has been presented to earn some brownie points for the Muslim League government, so that if it has to go into elections, or even if elections are delayed but they have already demitted office, they can claim that they tried to put the economy back on the rails. They can blame their predecessors, which is Imran Khan's Tehreek-e-Insaf, and they can blame their successors, which is the caretaker government, and claim that, we were all set to put the economy back on the track, which is utter nonsense. Because what Ishaq Dar has done in this budget has planted more minefields than he has cleaned up. And what he has done is created a situation where government economic figures are totally meaningless. Nobody takes the data being churned out by the Pakistani finance ministry seriously anymore. So basically, that is what the budget is all about. Pakistan is broke. The only question is, when do they officially declare bankruptcy? They have already indicated, incidentally, this is also very interesting. Ishaq Dar has indicated that Pakistan is all set to go in for debt restructuring. But the governor of the State Bank of Pakistan has denied any restructuring plans. So the right hand of the government does not know what the left hand is doing. They are speaking at cross purposes. They do not have any idea, do not have any plan. Forget plan A. They don't have a plan B. They don't have a plan C. They don't have any plan whatsoever. It is something will happen. Some miracle will take place. Some monies will come our way because we are too dangerous to fail. We are too important to fail. And somebody will come at the last minute. This is the way Pakistan is running today. I don't think it can run like this for very long. I think, at least as far as the economy is concerned, it's pretty much end of the road. And unless something drastic happens now, I think default is the fate of Pakistan.